Someone asked if I would just debunk historical critical methods in the Old Testament. I have, touched on this here and there. There was a video I did on whether biblical monotheism developed. I argued no, it didn't develop. I think here our best defense is a good offense, in that historical criticism is an explanatory model for the biblical text. Okay, the text has a certain set of features, right? Every text is a very complicated web of properties. It's a certain sequence of letters in a particular arrangement. We want to explain how things got to be arranged in that way. And historical critics say that in order to explain why the text looks the way it does, you have to appeal to various sources, which are kind of patched together by a redactor, and that's explained by a series of religious revolutions in the history of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, and there's money-grubbing priests in the time of King Josiah who wrote the book of Deuteronomy so they could get money. I mean, it's very transparently based on these liberal Protestant critiques of sacramental theology. Doesn't prove it wrong, but I think it gives some context to it. I would say Scott Hahn has written a few books on the history of historical criticism, where he shows that historical criticism actually precedes the Enlightenment and helps give rise to the Enlightenment. So it's just not true that it is something we've empirically arrived at. But I think what we want to do is we want to show that we can explain the text best if we understand it to be a unity. The reason that it is I would have to say I don't think that historical criticism would back up what we believe. I mean, historical criticism, according to what most people mean by that term, includes things like JEDP, that the Pentateuch is a pastiche of, and I do know that there are alternative source critical models other than JEDP, but I'm using that kind of as a way to refer to the whole system. I think liberal Protestantism is farther than conservative Protestantism from orthodoxy. So I would say historical criticism, anything that a person thinks that they're going to gain from historical criticism, they're going to pay for several times over. And most importantly, I just don't think it's true. So we want to show that we can explain why the biblical text is the way that it is based on traditional ideas about its authorship. We want to show that it makes the most sense as a unity, that certain little details in the book of Joshua are explained by other little details of the book of Joshua, which most source critics think are written by different authors. Here's an interesting example. In the book of Samuel, there are two places where the proverb, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" is quoted. And they actually say, well, this shows that there are two different sources in the book of Samuel because there are two different explanations for the rise of this proverb. But it is a profound example of missing the point, because the first quotation of this proverb is when Saul is called as a prophet, when the Spirit of God falls on him, he's given another heart. And then the second example is when Saul commits final apostasy and he rolls around on the ground because he cannot endure the presence of the Spirit anymore. There is a literary reason why these two why the proverb is exegeted in these two distinct ways. You can't understand one without understanding the other. So that's what I'd say on historical criticism. Okay.